"You can't fly that," the CEO yelled, loud enough for the entire rooftop to hear, his voice slicing through the helicopter's silent blades like a slap. Their laughter followed, sharp and careless, aimed at the man holding a mop instead of a pilot's helmet. Cameras captured every second, ready to broadcast humiliation to anyone scrolling by. Yet he didn't flinch. His eyes stayed fixed on the machine they swore he wasn't worthy to touch. And when his hand reached the door, the world had no idea it was watching the moment everything would change. By the way, where are you watching from? Tell me in the comments below. He knew something they didn't. This wasn't a story about sweeping floors. It was about what happens when the person nobody respects ends up being the only one who can save a life. The janitor paused at the edge of the helipad, feeling the weight of all the polished shoes and expensive watches judging him. He had spent months avoiding attention, keeping his past locked away like a dangerous secret. Staying invisible meant staying employed. Staying quiet meant Claire could keep breathing easily. That was all that mattered. He carried himself with a calm the others mistook for submission. They didn't understand how close fear and control could look from the outside. He had lived through worse storms than corporate mockery. Flames and wind and desperation had once been his battlefield. Compared to that, a billionaire's voice was nothing but noise. He turned away from the machine for now, pulling his cleaning cart with the practiced grace of someone who had learned to blend into corners. The rooftop launch event sparkled above the skyline, glass buildings catching sunlight like trophies of wealth. The CEO, Dominic Rakis, stood front and center, rehearsed a smile ready for the live stream. Photographers snapped photos of him stepping back, bored already. He was just background. He was meant to stay that way. Claire's inhaler weighed lightly in his pocket, a quiet reminder of why he showed up each morning before dawn. 7 years old and brave enough for the both of them, she fought each breath with a resilience that humbled him. Keeping this job meant keeping her safe. Losing it meant hospitals he couldn't afford. So he made himself small, absorbing every order thrown at him with a nod. "Mop here, move that. Don't stand there. Don't look so confident." But sometimes confidence slipped out before he could stop it. When the pilot walked by earlier, complaining about a minor vibration in the rotor assembly, he couldn't help mentioning the tension rods might be misaligned. That earned him a snort and a sarcastic, "Sure, thanks, janitor." He let it go. Better to swallow truth than choke on ego. Now, as the CEO praised his own vision for this advanced rescue craft, a siren tone chimed from the pilot's headset. He saw confusion first, then panic. The event staff rushed around Dominic, whispering rapidly. He heard the word wildfire. He heard Sophia. He saw Dominic's posture crack. The pilot dropped to his knees, coughing violently from smoke inhalation sustained earlier during a promotional flight. Medics sprinted in. Dominic demanded answers, furious and terrified, but all he received were stumbling explanations and useless apologies. The helicopter sat idle. Roads were blocked. Fire was moving fast. Air. That was what mattered. Air and time. The janitor's pulse thudded against his ribs, old instincts waking up like wolves. He stepped forward again without thinking, eyes already reading weather flags and wind direction, calculating the safest flight corridor through orange haze rising in the distance. Dominic saw him move and lost his temper entirely. "You can't fly that. Get away from there. You don't know anything." The man said it loud to reclaim his authority, to remind everyone who mattered. But the janitor wasn't looking at him anymore. He was seeing a smoke line creeping toward a frightened child who couldn't outrun the air closing around her. He stood taller. No one noticed how he squared his shoulders. how he breathed slowly through his nose like he was centering a helicopter in crosswinds. They only saw a janitor daring to exist outside his station. He looked once at the skyline, shiny towers glinting like they owned the world. Then he looked at the helicopter, silent and waiting like it remembered him. He hadn't touched controls in years, but muscle memory didn't care about time. The sky didn't care about titles. A child needed him, and invisible men don't stay invisible when the world needs a hero. He inhaled the sharp air, ignoring fear, ignoring doubt, knowing that hesitation kills faster than flame. Every second mattered. Every heartbeat counted. He was ready to act now, right here, today. The murmurs were spreading like wildfire across the rooftop. Everyone looking from the helicopter to the janitor as if wondering whether they had stepped into the wrong version of reality. Dominic Rakes hadn't moved from where he stood, his expression twisted between fear for his daughter and fury that someone beneath him dared interrupt the polished disaster unfolding in front of investors and cameras. But the janitor didn't wait for permission. His legs carried him toward the stairwell, instinct taking over before his mind could catch up. He needed to get Claire. He needed to make sure she was safe before he ever took a risk like this. In the service corridor below, fluorescent lights flickered as he rushed through. Claire sat on a folding chair next to the supply closet, doodling on the back of a maintenance request form. She looked up with a curious tilt of her head, the tiny movement that always made his chest tighten. He forced a steady breath before kneeling in front of her, pretending this was just another day, just another shift. "Hey, Star," he said softly, brushing a thumb over the edge of her inhaler clip. "How's the breathing holding up?" She gave a little shrug, then pressed the inhaler to her chest with both hands, like she always did when she felt a little scared. "Better," she whispered. "The medicine helped. Can we go home soon?" Home. Their tiny basement apartment that smelled faintly of detergent and old pipes. A safe place, yes, but not if he lost this job. Not if a single misstep put both of them back into the uncertainty he had worked so hard to escape. He swallowed the truth with a small nod. "In a bit, I promise," he said. "But I need you to stay right here for a few minutes, okay?" Her eyes studied his face in that frighteningly perceptive way of hers. "You look like you're thinking about flying again." He paused. Even after everything, she could still read him like an open book. That terrified him. "No, sweetheart, just a little work thing," he lied with a tight smile. "I'll be right back. Close your eyes and take slow breaths, like we've practiced." She nodded, trusting him without question. That trust was heavier than any rotor assembly he had ever lifted. He stood, gripping the handle of the closet door until his knuckles whitened. Behind the door sat worn equipment, mops, soaps, gloves, all symbols of the life he built from the shards of his old one. A life held together by Claire's need for air and his need to never see another family ripped apart by a fire. But upstairs, someone else's child was suffocating. Someone else's father was breaking apart in front of him. Elias knew what panic like that tasted like. He had lived through its bitterness once, and it had left scars deep enough to change the way he breathed. He wouldn't let another parent drown in that feeling, even if that parent had looked at him like nothing more than dirt beneath a polished shoe. He straightened, forcing his shoulders back. If he was going to climb into that helicopter, he couldn't go half alive. He needed every ounce of the man he used to be, the trained rescue pilot who made impossible choices in impossible skies. His feet carried him into the equipment room. He pulled open a small metal locker he had kept locked since his first day. Inside was a single item, folded carefully, a faded patch with wings and a number that represented countless hours in the air. He ran his thumb over its stitching. The memory of his wife's smile flashed like sunlight. Her voice followed. "Flying saves lives, Eli. Don't ever let fear ground you." Fear hadn't grounded him. Grief had. Pain had. The unbearable weight of knowing his hands had been on the controls when she slipped away. But Claire kept him alive. And now Sophia needed him to be more than invisible. He tucked the patch into his pocket next to the inhaler clip. Claire had given him that clip the day he started this job, a tiny reminder that helping her breathe came first. Maybe today, helping another child breathe was the same kind of promise. He stepped back into the hallway, and that's when Dominic's head of security cornered him. "You," the guard barked. "CEO wants you nowhere near the launch zone. Wait downstairs until further instructions." He didn't break stride. "There's a kid trapped out there. She doesn't have time for instructions." The guard grabbed his arm, but Elias twisted free with a smooth, precise movement, one that spoke of old training, not janitorial shifts. It startled the guard enough that his grip released. If anyone had been paying attention, they would have wondered where a cleaner learned tactical disengagement. Behavioral foreshadowing. Small cracks in the story everyone believed. He sprinted back up the stairs 2 at a time, lungs burning from the rush of adrenaline. The helicopter appeared again as he burst onto the rooftop, dominant, powerful, waiting. Staff still scrambled around the grounded pilot. Dominic paced in frantic circles, phone to his ear, shouting for updates that weren't coming fast enough. Elias pushed through the crowd. Dominic spun around, disbelief and fury colliding. "I told you! Stay away!" "And I told you," Elias said evenly. "She doesn't have time." Dominic stepped closer, ready to throw another verbal blow, but Elias wasn't listening anymore. His gaze remained locked on the helicopter. Every detail called out to him. Pitch links aligned, tail rotor clear, fuel gauge sitting just above critical. It was ready, if someone who knew what they were doing sat inside. The CEO's voice cracked with fear as he shouted more demands, but they landed like pebbles against steel. Elias moved forward, one step, then another, owning the ground he walked on for the first time in years. Even arrogance quiets in the presence of purpose. He reached the cockpit door again, fingers brushing the smooth metal like greeting an old friend. The rooftop fell silent in stunned anticipation, and when he climbed inside, it was as if gravity itself shifted. Everyone feeling the first pull of a reversal, already destined to happen. "Where are you watching from?" No one dared breathe as he settled into the co-pilot seat, fingertips hovering above the familiar arrangement of switches and screens. He tried not to look like he belonged there, but every muscle in his body betrayed him. Posture straightened, shoulders squared. Hands remembered the weight of responsibility. Years of training stirred awake, rattling chains he had locked for so long. He controlled his breathing, but adrenaline pulsed hard against his ribs. The helicopter felt like a living thing again, waiting for a command he was terrified to give. Dominic stormed up beside the door, face flushed red with fear and pride colliding. "Get out of there," he shouted. "You're going to get us all killed." Elias didn't even look his way. His eyes scanned the control panel. Fuel levels were adequate for a fast out-and-back maneuver. Avionics flickered. Still online despite the aborted launch. Rotor alignment correct. Wind direction steady enough. Fire line spreading faster than they predicted. They were running out of minutes. But Dominic wasn't finished. "If you touch anything without authorization, you're done here. Fired. Gone." A few employees flinched at the threat, glancing at the janitor in the cockpit like he was seconds away from ruining his life. but ruining his life. That had already happened years ago, in bright orange flames and a rescue gone wrong. This was how he protected what life he had rebuilt. A medic pressed a cold pack against the fallen pilot's forehead. "We need someone who actually knows how to fly this thing," she shouted. Dominic snapped back. "Of course we do, but certainly not him." Heads turned. Whispers slid across the rooftop like wind. Is he serious? Did he see how he moved? He knew what to check first. Security stepped closer. "Sir," one whispered to Dominic, "maybe just give him a minute. He clearly knows." "I said no," Dominic barked. Elias finally looked up, eyes sharp. "Your daughter doesn't have a minute." The words struck deeper than any insult. Dominic froze, jaw trembling. The rooftop noise blurred to a distant hum. For the first time, Dominic saw not the mop, not the uniform, but the steady fire in a father's eyes. Still, he shook his head. "You don't understand what's at stake." Elias's voice softened. "Actually, I do." Just then, a tech supervisor, someone who often nodded at Elias during the late-night shifts, looked closer, recognition dawning. "Wait, I've seen you before," he muttered. "Air Force, right? Rescue unit?" Elias's throat tightened. He didn't want this conversation, not here, not in front of cameras. But the whisper spread like a secret, tearing free from shadows. Another voice added, "Wasn't there a story? A pilot who pulled kids out of that canyon fire years ago?" "That was him," the supervisor whispered now, louder. Dominic's expression shifted, confusion cracking through arrogance. "What is he talking about?" Elias gripped the doorframe. His past rushed in. His wife's terrified voice through a headset, the call sign he swore he'd never respond to again, the smoky air that suffocated their final moments together. He shut his eyes and shoved those memories back into the locked room inside his chest. "I'm not that man anymore," he said, barely audible. "But I'm all you've got." Silence swallowed the rooftop. The live stream camera panned closer, capturing every breath, every doubt, every tear that threatened to spill from the CEO's eyes but wouldn't dare in public. Dominic shook his head again, more fragile now. He clung to the last thread of his authority. "No, I can't trust you." Elias swallowed. "You don't have to trust me. Just trust that she needs help. And I know how to help her." The medics called out updates urgently. Sophia's condition worsening, oxygen levels dropping. Traffic reports confirmed the roads remained blocked. Air evacuation was the only chance. But Dominic, paralyzed by ego and fear, still refused to step aside. And that's when fate intervened. The pilot on the ground coughed violently, gasping for air. Through strained effort, he reached up and grabbed Dominic's sleeve, pulling him closer. With a hoarse whisper no one expected, he rasped, "He knows what to do. Let him—" Dominic froze. He looked down at the man who had trained for years to fly his corporate pride and joy, and saw that even he believed in the janitor. For a heartbeat, the world teetered on the edge of decision. Elias could feel it, like the moment right before a rotor lifts free of the ground. That tiny pause where physics hasn't chosen a direction yet. Up or down. Life or loss. Dominic looked into Elias's eyes again. This time, there was no mocking. Just raw, terrified humanity. "If anything happens to her," he whispered. Elias nodded. "Nothing will happen to her. Not today." Dominic stepped back, silent consent finally falling into place. Elias turned back to the controls. Hands steady now. Movements deliberate. Even before the engine roared to life, confidence surged through his veins like oxygen. The man they dismissed had just earned the right to try. Below them, Claire waited, without knowing her father was risking everything again. Above them, a scared little girl prayed without knowing who was coming. And in between those two children, caught between fear and courage, stood a man who refused to let fire steal another life. He adjusted his grip on the collective, heart locking into mission mode. It was time to rise. The engine whined as the helicopter powered up, blades groaning against the growing tension in the air. People stepped back instinctively, shielding their faces from the gusting wind. Dominic stood nearest the cockpit, fists clenched and jaw rigid, but he didn't stop him. Fear was clawing its way through his arrogance now, and fear changes everything. Through the windshield, Elias watched warning lights blink to life. His breath stayed slow and controlled, but beneath the surface, his heart was waging war against every memory he'd tried to bury. The headset felt too familiar. The vibrations through the seat pulled him toward the past like a gravitational force. He gripped the controls tighter, fighting the tremor in his fingers. He had promised himself he would never fly again. Then he pictured Sophia. Smoke, flames. A terrified girl whose lungs were collapsing around her. He pictured Claire, her small hand gripping his shirt when she had her worst asthma attack, whispering that she didn't want to stop breathing. He would not let another child live that fear. Door still open, Elias called out, "I need coordinates." His voice cut through the chaos, steady, commanding, undeniably trained. A communications tech rushed forward, tablet trembling in his hands. "We've got a locked ping from her phone. She's near an old ranger station just south of the fire line. Fire crews can't reach her." "Send it to the console now," Elias said, and the tech scrambled to comply. Dominic hovered close, his fear spilling into desperation. "If you fail, I won't," Elias answered, simple as fact. As if summoned by that confidence, the pilot on the ground stirred, struggling to speak. Elias leaned down slightly, voice low. "I'll take it from here, brother." The pilot nodded, a flicker of respect in his tired eyes. Elias pulled the door shut. Cameras caught Dominic's face as it dawned on him. The man he'd mocked moments ago was now the only one capable of saving his daughter. The helicopter strained against gravity, blades slicing the rooftop air into roaring chaos. Elias breathed in. The fear didn't vanish. It sharpened, became purpose, and then a flashback hit him like turbulence. Bright orange sky, a canyon engulfed in smoke. A young woman in the passenger seat, eyes determined even through fear. "You're doing everything right," she had said. "Just fly." He tried. A wing clipped falling debris. The aircraft lurched, her scream, her name, her wedding ring. Elias blinked, forcing the memory back into the burning archive of his mind. Not now, not again. The moment he tried to lift off, the blades dipped. Not with malfunction, but with hesitation creeping into his muscle memory. His breath hitched. He felt the weight of judgment from every angle. Dominic's doubt, the rooftop staff's terror, his own guilt threatening to anchor him to the ground forever. But then, soft footsteps behind him. A light tap on the cockpit door. Claire. She had climbed the stairs alone. She pressed her palm flat against the window, inhaler hanging from her fingers. She mouthed 3 small words. "You've got this." Elias drew a breath deep enough to silence the chaos inside him. Fear transformed into clarity. He lifted the helicopter clean off the rooftop. Gasps rose from the crowd below. Even Dominic stood still, breath held like it might escape if he moved. The craft climbed higher, steady and sure, rainbows of city lights reflecting along its spinning blades. Elias angled toward the direction of the wildfire. orange smoke bleeding into the horizon like a wound that wasn't healing fast enough. Inside the tower, screens displayed his flight path. Thousands watching the live stream saw it too. Comment sections exploded with confusion and awe. Who is this guy? Why does he fly like a pro? Isn't he a janitor? Moments later, a voice crackled through the radio. Dominic's emergency coordination team trying to maintain control over a situation that had already outgrown them. Wind speeds increasing, visibility dropping fast. We're transferring airspace clearance to you. You're in command now. Those words carried a weight Dominic would never have willingly given him in any other moment. But the world was changing second by second. As he gained altitude, city noise disappeared beneath the rumble of engines. Smoke swirled against the glass like dark ocean waves. Out here, there were no hierarchies, just survival. He checked instruments again. Every reading memorized in that part of him he had once sworn to silence. The helicopter shifted into steady cruising speed, a direct line to the ranger station. He wasn't just flying. He was becoming himself again. Down below, alongside terrified investors and worried employees, a single father's story was rewriting itself in real time. Every rotation of the blade spread a message across the sky. Underestimated doesn't mean incapable. His radio buzzed again. The tech's voice sounded more confident now. We're with you. You're doing great. Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The world was answering for him. And far ahead, hidden by walls of burning trees, a young girl waited for the only man bold enough and broken enough to defy his own fear for her life. He pushed the throttle forward. No turning back. Smoke swallowed the sky ahead, thick and churning like a living thing defending its territory. Elias adjusted his altitude, searching for a break in the hellscape. The wildfire glowed beneath him, flames clawing up the ridgeline, devouring trees in violent snaps. He'd flown this nightmare before. Years ago, different fire, different faces, same terror. He scanned readings, mind calculating. Wind shifts unpredictable. Heat signatures unstable. Rotor torque must adapt for turbulence. His knuckles tightened on the cyclic. The helicopter shook as a pocket of hot air rose suddenly. He steadied it easily, though sweat chilled his spine. Back at the tower, Dominic stared at a huge screen broadcasting his daughter's last known location. Every second was a countdown he couldn't control. His phone slipped from his grip, hands trembling like they didn't belong to him. The journalists caught the moment on camera. The world saw fear finally cracking the polished CEO. Is he gonna get her? A young intern whispered beside him. Dominic didn't answer. He couldn't. He didn't have answers anymore. Up in the cockpit, Elias heard the radio crackle. A dispatcher spoke fast. Words clipped with urgency. Fires jumped containment. Ranger Station nearly surrounded. We're losing visual. He swallowed. That meant the landing zone was shrinking by the second. If he arrived too late, it wouldn't exist at all. He locked eyes briefly with Claire in his mind, imagining how she would look if trapped in smoke with no escape. That thought fueled him harder than any training ever had. He dipped lower, trying to spot the ranger station through the heavy haze. Ash blasted against the windshield like black snow. Alarms chimed, heat levels rising, near the craft's limit. He steadied his voice. Just a bit closer. Through the smoke, a sliver of shape emerged. Wood structure half burned, roof collapsing on one side. A tiny figure clung to a railing on the porch, a shape too small and too scared. Sophia. Her coughing carried faintly through the radio channel, weak and desperate. Elias's heart clenched painfully. She was running out of air. He swung the helicopter around. angling the landing skids toward the only patch of earth not aflame, a small dirt clearing near the station. Flames licked dangerously close. If the fire surged even a few feet, it would swallow the helicopter whole. The rotor wash beat down the embers as he descended. Trees crackled around them like bones snapping. The landing gear touched soil, hard, but safe enough. He cut throttle to idle, keeping the blades ready for immediate liftoff. He grabbed the emergency respirator kit behind the seat and flung open the door. The heat punched him instantly, trying to shove him back inside. His boots hit dirt. Fire roared like a monster thrilled to see prey running straight toward it. He sprinted through swirling ash, lungs burning, eyes watering. Sophia spotted him and reached out, tears streaking soot on her cheeks. Her voice barely made sound. "It hurts to breathe." He placed the respirator over her mouth gently, adjusting straps with practiced precision. She gasped once, twice, then drew air deep enough to stay conscious. "You're okay," he said, voice firm. "I've got you." She nodded against his arm. Her body was light, too light, and he carried her easily. But as he turned back toward the helicopter, the fire screamed louder, trees collapsing behind them. The path was narrowing. Seconds mattered. An explosion erupted to their left, a propane tank near the station igniting, sending a shockwave rippling through the smoke. Elias shielded Sophia with his body and kept running, boots slipping in the ash but never stopping. When he reached the helicopter, he swung her inside, buckling her in quickly. She clutched the respirator mask like it was the only thing tying her to life. "Are we gonna die?" she whispered. He locked eyes with her, steady, calm, unshakable. "No, not while I'm flying." The words tasted like a vow. He strapped into the pilot seat, engines screaming against the heat. Warning lights flashed angrily. If they stayed another 30 seconds, the helicopter could melt into the ground. Fire climbed the tail boom. A burning branch slammed against the side window. He didn't flinch. Fear had surrendered. The skids lifted, just inches, but then sank again. The helicopter growled like a wounded animal trying to rise. Flames sucked oxygen from the air, starving the rotors of lift. Elias grit his teeth. "Come on, come on." He poured every ounce of strength into the controls, but physics didn't care. If the rotors couldn't breathe, neither could they. Sophia coughed, again, ragged, terrified. That sound triggered something primal inside him. His grip tightened. He read the crosswind angle, shifted pitch, redistributed torque, moves so fast even trained pilots would have struggled to follow. The helicopter wobbled once, but then lift. Just enough. They rose a foot, then 2, then 5. The flames reached up claws of fire, trying to drag them back down. Elias pushed harder. The helicopter climbed higher, climbing out of hell with a trembling roar. Sophia whimpered, "Don't let go." "I won't," he promised. "Not ever." Below, flames devoured the clearing where they had stood seconds earlier, and above, the sky opened like salvation. He steadied the flight path, adrenaline pulsing hot in his veins. On the rooftop, far away, Dominic vaulted toward the edge, watching that small machine claw through smoke with his entire world inside. Back in the cockpit, Elias breathed finally. She was alive. And the world watching the live stream saw the janitor they mocked doing what billionaires couldn't buy, saving a life. By the way, if stories like this give you goosebumps, subscribe right now so you don't miss how this turns out. The helicopter punched upward into smoke so thick it turned the sun into a dim red smear through the glass. Elias steadied the cyclic with one hand, while keeping his other palm close enough to catch Sophia's respirator if her trembling fingers slipped. Her breaths were shallow but stronger than before, each one buying time. He leaned slightly, adjusting rotor pitch to counter a gust that tried to shove them sideways into the burning treetops. She stared at him with exhausted, terrified eyes. He gave her the smallest nod, a silent promise that she wasn't alone. The fire wasn't going to win, not this time. Below them, the inferno roared and cracked, devouring an entire forest with unrelenting hunger. Elias could still feel the heat even now, thousands of feet above, his body remembering too well what it was to be trapped beneath flames with someone he loved. Memories scraped against his mind, threatening to drag him backward into grief, but he didn't allow them to take over. Sophia needed him focused. The girl breathed like each inhale was a victory, and he wasn't about to let panic steal her next one. "Almost clear," he murmured, not sure if he meant the smoke or fate. Ahead, a narrow corridor of sky began to open up, blue cutting through the ashy haze. Elias guided them through it like threading a needle blindfolded. The helicopter's frame rattled from turbulent crosswinds, and Sophia gasped, clutching the edge of her seat. "You're doing great," he reassured her, voice steady as steel. "We'll get you home soon." Dominic's voice came through the radio suddenly, breathless and shaky. "Elias, do you have her?" Elias didn't answer right away. The airspace here was unpredictable, and distraction could kill. He focused on elevation, speed, vibration in the rotors, the delicate path between control and chaos. Finally, when it was safe, he pressed the radio switch. "She's with me. She's alive." The entire rooftop erupted into relieved shouts and tears. Even through the static, Elias could hear Dominic's choked exhale, the sound of a father shattering open. "You, thank God, thank you," Dominic managed, voice cracking in a way money could never prevent. But gratitude wouldn't undo what was still ahead. A burst of turbulence slammed the helicopter sideways. Elias reacted instantly, leveling the craft before the blades clipped a treetop. Sophia whimpered, dropping her inhaler. He grabbed it midair without looking, handing it back smoothly before tightening his belt and correcting their trajectory. Behind them, a canyon of smoke tried to chase them down like a predator unwilling to lose its prey. They were not safe yet. His radio beeped again. "Wind shift incoming from the west. Fire crews say it's unpredictable." "Copy," Elias replied curtly, already compensating. The smoke began thinning as they cleared the danger zone. The city skyline glimmered in the distance, safety made of steel and glass. He breathed out, long and slow. The worst was behind them, or so he hoped. Sophia leaned closer, voice soft and raspy. "You're a janitor." He almost smiled. "Sometimes. But how do you fly so good? So good." His wife used to say the same thing, half laughing, half in awe, as she teased him about his show-off landings. His chest pinched painfully. He lifted his eyes toward the horizon, refusing to let grief steal the moment. "I learned a long time ago," he answered, "from disaster, from duty, from love." Sophia studied him. "You're like a superhero janitor." This time, the smile came, genuine and warm. "Something like that." The helicopter's warning light blinked, fuel low. They could reach the rooftop, but not with delays. He radioed ahead. "Prepare landing clearance." Dominic answered instantly. "Cleared. Everything's ready." Everything. The rooftop medical team, the crowd, the cameras that captured every second. The CEO, whose pride had been peeled away until only a father remained. But before they could bring the helicopter down, a severe gust hit them broadside without warning. Wind screamed violently, rattling the fuselage. The city rose beneath them with terrifying speed, the perfect postcard background for disaster. Sophia clutched his sleeve. "Are we crashing?" "No," Elias said, voice solid as bedrock. "Not if I can help it." He lowered the collective slightly, angled the nose into the gust, letting the wind push under the rotor instead of against it. The helicopter tilted sharply, but then leveled, obeying the hands of someone who knew its language better than he knew his own heartbeat. He could feel Sophia watching him like he was rewriting the world she thought she knew. The last of the smoke trailed off the skids, leaving blue sky open above them. The rooftop appeared below. Fire trucks, news crews, employees, Dominic pacing like a man who couldn't survive another second of uncertainty. They descended slowly, not just toward the landing pad, but toward the moment where truth could no longer be ignored. Cameras pointed up, capturing every breath of this return flight. The live stream audience swelled into hundreds of thousands, strangers holding their breath together. Dominic stepped forward, lips moving in silent prayer as the helicopter lined up with the pad. The skids kissed the ground with a gentle, perfect landing, proof undeniable that the man they dismissed was the expert they desperately needed. Elias powered down the engine, silence falling heavier than the blades that slowed beside them. Sophia was alive, and the world had just witnessed the truth. Yet, before he opened the door, Elias glanced through the window and saw Claire, standing a few steps back, eyes wide with pride and fear and love all tangled together. She understood the risk. She saw the bravery. She saw who her father really was. Sophia reached for his hand. "You saved me." Elias shook his head softly. "We saved each other." But as the rotors slowed to a stop, he understood this moment wasn't the end of the fight. It was only the beginning of the world seeing him. The rotor blades slowed to a steady tick-tick overhead, and for a moment the entire rooftop seemed suspended between terror and relief. Sophia clung tighter to the respirator as medics rushed forward, easing her onto a stretcher with the gentleness reserved for paper-thin moments. Dominic nearly stumbled trying to reach her, his composure shattered, his immaculate suit wrinkled, his tie crooked. He knelt beside his daughter, brushing ash from her hair with trembling fingers. "Daddy!" Sophia whispered beneath the oxygen mask. Dominic's breath broke. "I'm here. I'm right here." Elias unbuckled his belt slowly, letting the truth of what had just happened settle into the spinning edges of his awareness. He opened the cockpit door. The sudden hush wasn't silence, it was shock, awe, confusion. Dozens of employees, journalists, and security staff stared like they were seeing a ghost climb out of that helicopter instead of the janitor who cleaned their trash cans. One paramedic glanced up at him and offered a slow nod of acknowledgement. Respect, gratitude, recognition, all foreign currencies in his world. Claire sprinted forward before anyone could stop her. She bounded straight into her father's arms, inhaler bumping against his chest. Elias caught her, holding her tight enough to keep her from shaking, or maybe to keep himself from shaking. "You flew," she said against his shirt. "You really flew." "I did," he whispered, burying his face into her hair for one long second. Just like before. Her little hands grabbed his shoulders like she was anchoring him to the ground. But then a flashbulb popped, and his protective instincts yanked him back into reality. Cameras were everywhere. This moment, this private, personal reunion, was being turned into spectacle. He set Claire gently down and knelt to meet her eyes. "Stay with Grace," he said, pointing to the friendly tech supervisor who always brought extra snacks during double shifts. "Don't leave her side." Claire nodded solemnly. She knew the tone in his voice. He was shifting, becoming something she rarely saw anymore. The man forged in fire, not mops and detergents. Elias stood again and turned toward Dominic. The CEO was still crouched beside Sophia as paramedics secured more oxygen support. Finally, he rose, slowly, like arrogance weighed him down more than fear ever could. Their eyes met. No words passed between them at first, just the raw truth of what had happened. One man who believed power controlled life, and one who had just disproved it. Dominic took a step forward. His voice cracked like thin glass. "I didn't know." Elias didn't respond. The world was watching too closely. But then Dominic tried again. How do you know how to do all that?" There it was, the inevitable question. The one answer Elias hoped would never be asked, because telling it meant reopening wounds held shut by responsibility and routine. He exhaled slowly. Years in wildfire, search and rescue. A lifetime ago. A ripple passed through the crowd, shock, then a wave of regret-soaked guilt as people remembered every time they'd dismissed him. Every order barked. Every time they walked past without seeing him at all. Dominic's eyebrows pulled together, the realization stinging hard. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Elias let silence do the heavy lifting. Because how do you explain that the past sometimes hurts too much to keep alive? That trauma doesn't fade just because applause returns? That saving one person and losing another can crush a man more deeply than any insult ever could? He didn't owe this man that answer. Not here. Not now. Still, the spotlight demanded a performance, so he offered the piece of truth he could live with. "I left that life behind. My daughter comes first now." Dominic swallowed hard, the arrogance fully stripped away. He opened his mouth again, but before he could speak, a reporter elbowed her way forward, microphone raised. Sir, are you saying the janitor saved your daughter?" Her voice was too loud, designed for headlines over humanity. Dominic stiffened. The cameras leaned in. Hungry. Elias hated it. He stepped forward, shielding Sophia from the onslaught of flashes. "No more questions," he warned, tone low. "She needs medical attention." Reporters backed up, startled by the authority in his voice. Security moved to block the media line, finally doing something useful. Paramedics wheeled Sophia toward the elevator. Dominic followed closely, one hand gripping. The stretcher, like letting go, meant losing her again. He hesitated once, looking back at Elias with 1,000 unspoken words. Gratitude, guilt, fear, respect, and something deeper, recognition of a man he had underestimated. "I'll be back," Dominic forced out before disappearing into the elevator. The rooftop slowly cleared. Workers resumed movement, unsure how to behave around the man who had just rewritten their understanding of him. The communications tech approached, holding out a hand hesitantly. "I'm glad she's okay," he said. "Thank you for, everything." Elias shook his hand briefly. "She's tough, strong kid." The tech nodded, then walked away, leaving Elias and Claire near the helicopter, alone but no longer invisible. The helicopter, once a centerpiece of corporate bragging rights, now stood like a quiet monument behind them. A symbol flipped on its head. A vessel of poetic justice. He had flown it not for publicity or praise, but because a life needed saving. But the man he saved couldn't hide anymore. Public exposure had begun. The next move, the next judgment, would belong to Dominic Rakes. And that was when Elias finally allowed himself a long, unguarded breath. Sirens echoed faintly from the city streets below, but up here, the rooftop felt strangely quiet. The helicopter finally powered down, rotor blades slowing until they became only a faint memory of motion. Elias stayed beside the aircraft, one hand resting on the cool metal as if grounding himself from the adrenaline still firing through his veins. Claire leaned lightly against his side, inhaler clipped neatly to her dress. A constant guardian. He brushed the back of her head gently. "You okay?" She nodded, though her wide eyes betrayed how overwhelming this moment was. The wind carried strands of her hair across her face, and he quietly tucked them behind her ear. Medics had taken Sophia inside. Dominic was gone with them. The rooftop crew hustled equipment around, trying to look busy, trying not to stare, but they failed. Every glance was a mixture of curiosity and disbelief. A janitor had cut through smoke and death like it was another aisle he needed to mop. Now, everyone struggled to reconcile the man they saw with the man they had ignored. A soft beeping came from Elias's pocket, Claire's spare inhaler clip tapping the edge of a metal rivet. He pulled it free, thumb brushing over its worn plastic edges. Faded stickers decorated the surface, a little blue star, a half-peeled rainbow. Claire had given it to him the night he accepted this job. "Just in case you forget," she'd said back then, "breathing is important." It had stayed with him every day since, a reminder of his purpose, his promise. He clipped it securely back to his belt, the motion almost reverent. The inhaler wasn't for him, but it reminded him to breathe anyway. And today, that little piece of plastic rode straight through fire with him. Symbolic. Necessary. Proof that he wasn't flying for glory or redemption. He was flying so his daughter could keep her father. A door opened behind him. Heavy footsteps. He didn't turn. He already knew that stride. The purposeful stomp of someone used to entire buildings moving out of their way. Dominic Rakes stepped into view, still disheveled from the earlier panic. His eyes carried the type of exhaustion only a terrified parent could understand. For the first time, Dominic didn't seem 10 feet tall. He seemed human. Elias stood up straighter without thinking. Claire held his hand tighter. Dominic stopped in front of them, clearing his throat. "The doctors say Sophia is stable," he said quietly. "They're giving her additional respiratory support, but she's going to be okay." Relief washed through Elias slowly, steady and warm. "Good," he said. "I'm glad." Dominic swallowed hard. It was a weird reversal, him delivering good news to the man who made it possible. "You saved her life," Dominic added. Elias didn't move. Praise was as unpredictable as wildfire. Dangerous if you let yourself stand too close too long. "I flew her out," he replied. "That's all." "No," Dominic said, voice firming with sincerity. "You saved her life. Don't diminish that." Before Elias could answer, cameras surged forward. Reporters had waited until the emergency cleared enough to prey on the aftermath. "Sir, why didn't you tell us you could fly? Are you former military? How does it feel to be a hero? Will you sue the company for discrimination? What do you think about the CEO yelling at you on live stream?" Claire flinched, shrinking against his leg. Elias stepped instinctively in front of her, shielding her from the eruption of lenses blasting light like weapon fire. Dominic finally snapped into action. "Shut those cameras down," he ordered security. "This isn't a press circus." But cameras don't obey commands. They obey momentum. Journalists shouted over each other, pelting questions like stones. Claire's breathing quickened. "Hey." Elias crouched, bringing himself eye level with her. "Look at me. We're okay. You're okay." She tried, but fear still fluttered beneath her ribs. Dominic watched, guilt twisting deeper. Then, almost timidly, he took a slow step closer. "Does she need help?" he asked, voice softened with concern. Elias shook his head. "Just space and air." Dominic turned on the crowd again. "Everyone back, now." His voice carried enough authority to topple silence into place. Reporters retreated reluctantly. When the noise settled, Dominic's gaze fell to the inhaler clipped to Elias's belt. "That's why you're here," he realized quietly. "Not because it's easy, but because she needs you." Elias didn't confirm it aloud. He didn't need to. He stood up again, facing Dominic fully. The CEO dragged, his hand across his face, searching for words that didn't exist yet. Finally, he managed, "I owe you more than I can say." "I didn't do it for you," Elias replied, not harsh, just honest. Dominic nodded. "I know." Claire tugged on her father's hand. "Daddy?" He glanced down. "Yeah?" She whispered, "Can we go home now?" For the first time, the question wasn't just about leaving the building. It was about grounding, healing, returning to the version of life where the world didn't ask him to be a hero. Elias looked to Dominic. "We're going." Dominic stepped aside immediately. "Of course." As they walked toward the stairwell, the helicopter stood behind them like a truth that could never be stuffed back into a janitor's closet. The livestream audience would remember the image forever. A man with a mop cart's uniform and a pilot's resolve, hand in hand with his daughter. People on the rooftop silently parted to let them through. Respect, real respect, carved the path. And while the world watched, Elias kept his focus on what mattered most. Claire's breathing, her tiny hand, her safety. Before they descended the stairs, he allowed himself one small glance back at the sky, not to relive the past, but to acknowledge the future. By the way, stories like this deserve to be seen. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what happens next. The hallway leading from the rooftop elevator smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt rubber, evidence of rushed emergency response and the residue of fear. Elias walked beside Claire, her smaller hand wrapped tightly around his. She tried to keep up with his stride, but her steps were shorter, quicker. He slowed just enough to match her pace. Today had demanded enough of her already. Medical personnel rushed past toward the elevators, carrying supplies and updates between floors. A nurse paused briefly. "Sophia is responding well," she said with a relieved smile. "Your timely extraction saved her lungs from severe damage." Elias nodded, quietly grateful. Saving people used to fill his chest with a soldier's pride. Today, that pride felt different, like something earned instead of owed. Claire leaned into him, whispering, "I'm hungry." He chuckled softly, brushing her cheek. "Let's get something to eat, Star." The simplest needs had never felt more grounding. They ducked into the building's small cafe, empty except for a barista wiping down tables after the rooftop chaos. Elias ordered a sandwich and a small cup of soup for Claire. She tucked into her food like she hadn't eaten in days, crumbs gathering in her lap. He watched her with quiet affection, the inhaler clip glinting as she moved. That clip, her gift, had been with him every moment of today's battle. It was small, trivial to anyone else, but to him it held the weight of every reason he kept going. A symbolic anchor keeping him from drifting into the flames of his past, but the peace was short-lived. Someone cleared their throat behind him. "Excuse me, sir?" a timid voice asked. Elias turned to see the documentary camera operator from the launch event. Camera now lowered, voice uncertain. "I'm sorry to bother you. It's just, people online are asking who you are." The stream cut out for a minute and viewers saw the CEO arguing with you before you flew off. They're questioning him. Elias stiffened. Public exposure. The victory strategy was already rolling forward without his control. He didn't like the spotlight, and he certainly didn't like being used as a weapon against someone. even someone who had treated him like nothing. "I'm just a janitor," he said carefully. The camera operator's eyebrows lifted. "That was more than just anything. Look." He lowered his voice. "You should see the comments. People are calling you the working-class hero. They're demanding to know why a trained rescue pilot was pushing a mop." Claire blinked up at Elias. Soup spoon paused midair. "Come on," the barista said as she passed. "Anyone who saw that landing knows he's more than a janitor." More eyes turned his way. Whispers spread. Phones lifted discreetly. Elias instinctively positioned his body in front of Claire, shielding her from sudden attention. "We're not doing this," he said firmly, guiding Claire toward the exit, but fate, as always, had its own agenda. The elevator dinged, and Dominic stepped out. Shirt wrinkled, hair disheveled, eyes red. Exhaustion had stolen his polished armor. For the first time since Elias had known him, Dominic looked like a father first and a CEO second. He spotted Elias and Claire instantly. "Wait," Dominic called, breath catching. Elias turned reluctantly. "How's she doing?" Dominic closed the distance, voice humbled. "She's breathing easier, awake even. She keeps asking to meet her." He glanced at Claire, then back, her hero. Claire's eyes widened. "Me?" Dominic let out a raw, weak laugh. "Yes, you. She remembers the little girl who gave her dad the courage to fly." Elias felt emotion tighten his throat. Dominic straightened, gathering the remnants of authority he still possessed. "Please," he said, "come with me." Elias hesitated, thinking of the cameras, the exposure, the vulnerability he still carried. But Claire tugged softly on his sleeve. "Can we see her, Daddy? She was really scared." That decided it. They followed Dominic through a secured door toward the emergency suite. The walls buzzed with the hum of machines monitoring fragile lives. At the end of the hallway, Sophia lay propped against pillows, mask still aiding her breathing but eyes bright. When she saw Elias and Claire enter, her face lit with recognition. "You came," she whispered. Claire shyly held up her inhaler. "We match now." Sophia's eyes filled with surprised delight. She held up, the small nebulizer resting on her chest. "We're like twins." The two girls smiled at each other. A connection formed not from wealth or status but survival. Elias took a step closer, feeling Dominic's gaze heavy on him. The CEO's face transformed as he watched the simple exchange. A kind of revelation dawning, unsettling and overdue. He saw the inhaler clipped to Elias's belt, the care, the love, the fatherhood written in every movement. Dominic's voice dropped to a whisper. "All this time, you were fighting a harder battle than any of us saw." Elias didn't respond. He didn't need to. Dominic inhaled shakily, resolve forming behind his eyes. "When she's stable, I'd like to speak with you privately, about what comes next." Elias raised an eyebrow. "What do you think comes next?" Dominic met his gaze without flinching. "Me making this right." There it was. Recognition. Accountability. The beginnings of a reversal. But poetic justice was not complete yet. Elias nodded slowly. "We'll talk." For now, though, the victory was simpler. 2 children breathing. 2 fathers learning. And a symbolic inhaler clip shining like a quiet badge of honor, reminding Elias that strength often hides in the smallest things. He squeezed Claire's hand gently, because no matter what was coming next, he wasn't invisible anymore. Morning sunlight spilled through the hospital room blinds like a new beginning refusing to wait for permission. By now, the news had spread across every screen in the city. Janitor pilot's rescue helicopter. CEO's daughter saved by unsung hero. Worker humiliated then saves the day. Clips of the rooftop confrontation replayed on a loop. The moment Dominic shouted, "You can't fly that," now a viral meme. Comment sections were on fire. For once, Elias wasn't the one being burned. Claire slept on 2 chairs pushed together beside Elias, curled under a borrowed blanket. She looked peaceful, her breathing even, her face soft. He brushed her hair back gently, losing himself in the quiet miracle that she was safe and here with him. A knock broke the stillness. Dominic stood in the doorway, no entourage, no bluster. He carried a fresh cup of coffee and placed it on the table without a word. His posture held none of the towering arrogance that usually accompanied him. Instead, he seemed smaller, humbled by the weight of everything he didn't know yesterday. "May I?" he asked, motioning to the chair opposite Elias. Elias nodded once. For a moment, neither spoke. The air was thick with things unsaid. Dominic finally cleared his throat. "This company, this tower, everything I built, I believed it kept my daughter safe." He looked down at his hands, rubbing a thumb over his wedding band. "Turns out nothing I had could protect her in the moment that mattered most." Elias said nothing. Sometimes silence was more honest than words. "I watched you," Dominic continued, voice cracking. "I watched you fight for her life like she was your own, and I watched the world realize they've been wrong about you, just like I was." The humility felt real, earned even. "You're not just some guy with a mop," Dominic said. "You're a pilot, a veteran, a father." He swallowed hard. "A better man than I've been." Elias didn't shift, didn't soften. Praise didn't erase scars. Dominic leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I know I can't undo the things I said, but I want to make things right. I want to give you back the sky you gave up." Elias's jaw tightened at that. The sky wasn't a gift. It was a battleground he left behind for a reason. "I stopped flying for my daughter," he said, low and steady. "I lost someone in a rescue. I couldn't risk Claire losing me too." Dominic's breath caught. "Your wife?" Elias nodded once. The look in his eyes told the rest. Dominic sat back, absorbing the depth of that loss. A man whose life revolved around control now faced a grief he couldn't fix with money or power. "I understand," he whispered, "but you deserve more than to clean up after people who don't respect you." Elias didn't deny that, but deserving something and wanting it were different battles. Before he could answer, the door slid open again. A small burst of energy bounced into the room. Sophia, mask still clipped to her shirt but face brighter than before. "Hero," she squeaked, feet pattering across the floor. Dominic's heart leapt into his throat. "Sweetheart, careful." "I'm okay," she giggled, hugging Elias's arm. "Thank you for saving me. You're like a real-life superhero." Elias smiled gently. "Glad you're okay, kiddo." Sophia turned toward Claire, still sleeping. "Is she okay too?" "She's just resting," Elias replied. Sophia moved to the chairs and placed a small hand on Claire's blanket, with the seriousness of a doctor listening for a heartbeat. "She's brave," she whispered. Dominic's gaze softened at the sight. 2 children whose lives had collided in chaos, now tied together by gratitude. A knock came from the hallway again, this time louder, followed by hurried voices, then cameras, then microphones. Journalists had tracked Dominic down, their hunger for spectacle insatiable. "Sir, is it true your employee saved your daughter? Why didn't you know he was a trained pilot? Will there be an internal review of your hiring biases? Is he being promoted? Is the company going to compensate him for the risk?" Security tried to contain them, but the questions flew faster than they could repel. Dominic stood, facing the swarm head-on. For the first time, he didn't hide behind confidence. He owned the truth. "Yes," he said, loudly enough to silence the hallway. "He saved my daughter's life, and if it weren't for him, I would have lost the most important person in my world." Flashes went off like lightning. Dominic wasn't asking for applause. He was confessing before witnesses. "He wasn't just our janitor," Dominic continued. "He is a highly trained rescue pilot, a father who sacrificed everything for his child, and this company failed to recognize his worth." That line hit hard. Employees pressed closer, their faces collapsing under guilt, admiration, and astonishment. Dominic turned toward Elias, voice clear and unwavering. "From this moment forward, I am offering him the position he deserves, Chief Emergency Response Pilot for Rake's Aerotech. Full benefits, full respect." A murmur of awe swept through the crowd. But Elias didn't stand. He didn't rush to accept a new life. Instead, he gently lifted Claire into his arms as she stirred awake, groggy and confused. He held her close, her inhaler clip brushing against his hand like a reminder. "Daddy?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. "Can we go home?" Elias looked into her trusting face. Then he looked up, past Dominic, past the crowd, toward the rooftop he had taken off from, toward the sky where he had defied fear, regained himself, and saved a life. He wasn't invisible anymore, but the sky he once belonged to wasn't his decision alone. He held his daughter tighter. "We'll talk," Elias said quietly. And that single line told the world. He was no longer the man being dismissed. He was the one making the decisions now. The boardroom overlooking the city was designed to impress. Floor-to-ceiling glass, marble so polished you could see fears reflected in it, and a dozen executives seated like judges in an arena. Outside the large windows, helicopters buzzed near the skyline, news stations filming Rake's Aerotech's headquarters from every angle. Inside, tension hovered like low fog. They weren't gathered for innovation now. They were gathered because the world wanted answers. Elias stood to one side of the long table, Claire beside him, holding onto his hand with both of hers. She didn't look intimidated, just fiercely protective. Her father's strength was her anchor, but her tiny hand was his. Together, they faced a room full of people who had decided his fate long before learning his name. Dominic entered last. Cameras flashed behind him as reporters were corralled into a viewing section near the rear. They would broadcast this meeting live. Public exposure, unavoidable now, and exactly what poetic justice required. Dominic stopped near the center of the table, catching Elias's gaze. No arrogance today, no perfect composure, just a man stepping into accountability. He placed his hands flat on the table. "We're not here to celebrate or pretend we handled things well," he began. His voice carried enough volume to silence every whisper. "We're here to acknowledge that our company didn't protect the people who protect us." Eyes turned toward Elias, some filled with remorse, others with shame at their complicity. Dominic continued, "Yesterday, I publicly humiliated a man who ended up saving my daughter's life. I misjudged him, we all did, and that failure cannot be ignored or excused." Executives shifted uncomfortably. The livestream audience watched, waiting for the twist, waiting for truth to finally be spoken aloud. Dominic stepped closer to Elias. "I owe you not just gratitude, but respect. And so does everyone in this room." Clapping began. Tentative, awkward, but Dominic raised a hand, silencing it. No applause, not yet. Earn it. He turned toward the journalists. "You want to know who he is? His name is Elias Ward. He flew wildfire rescue missions for years. He risked everything for strangers, and when tragedy took his wife, he stayed grounded to keep his daughter safe. His voice faltered, and I still treated him like he was disposable. Cameras zoomed on Elias's face. He didn't flinch or shift. He stood quietly, letting truth settle where it belonged. Dominic turned to him again. I offered you a job as Chief Emergency Response Pilot, but that's not enough. I want a partnership. A new division built around your expertise. You would lead operations, train personnel, develop rescue protocols, build the future of airborne response. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. This was more than respect. This was power, opportunity, transformation. But Elias didn't smile, didn't answer. Claire tugged his sleeve gently. Daddy, does that mean you'd fly again? That question cut through everything. The noise, the cameras, the company's desperation. Elias knelt, bringing himself level with her eyes. Flying is dangerous, he said softly. So was today, she whispered. He blinked at the weight of that truth. Claire's courage was growing faster than fear could keep up. I don't want you to ever worry about losing me, he murmured. She took her inhaler from the clip and pressed it into his hand. When you breathe, I breathe. We can be brave together. His heart tightened. She wasn't asking him to choose between being her father and being himself. She was asking him to be both. He looked up at Dominic. The CEO seemed to understand that this decision wasn't about career or recognition. It was about healing and trust and air. I'll only do this, Elias said slowly, if we build this division around the right values, not profit, not publicity, people, lives. Dominic nodded immediately. Whatever you say. The head of HR cleared his throat nervously. We can negotiate salary and benefits, of course, and ensure your daughter has comprehensive— Elias raised a hand. Her future isn't negotiable, it's guaranteed. Dominic stepped forward, extending his hand, not as a CEO to an employee, but as a father to another father. Agreed. Elias stared at that hand for a beat. It represented everything Dominic once lorded over. Him. Power. Authority. Status. Taking it now would mean he held those things too. Finally, Elias accepted the handshake. The boardroom erupted, not in applause but in something better. Change. Respect. Awareness that everyone had just witnessed a reversal, powerful enough to reshape more than just one life. Reporters rushed forward with more questions. What will be the name of the division? Are you returning to flight immediately? Do you forgive the CEO? Elias shielded Claire again, answering only the last one with a calm, steady look. I don't fly for forgiveness, he said. I fly to save lives. That's enough. The room fell silent. A truth that needed no amplification. Claire reached up and squeezed his hand. You're my hero, she whispered. He smiled at her, small and real. You're mine. Cameras caught that moment, the inhaler clip swinging gently as Elias lifted Claire into his arms, a symbol of why he fought, why he would fly again. Dominic exhaled, shoulders finally dropping, a man relieved not by victory but by humility. Public exposure had completed its cycle. Poetic justice had arrived. Now, all that remained was the new beginning. Elias stepped out of the boardroom carrying Claire, the fluorescent lights of the hallway reflecting in her sleepy eyes. The world outside the glass walls hummed with helicopters and headlines, his name already traveling farther than he ever intended to be seen. But right now, he wasn't thinking about the future of Rake's Aerotech. He was thinking about breakfast for his daughter, and maybe a quiet evening where no one called him a hero. They reached the elevator. Claire rested her head on his shoulder, safe and light in his arms. He pressed the button for the lobby and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded without opening her eyes. "Can we get pancakes?" He smiled at the simplicity. "Pancakes it is." The elevator doors opened into a lobby that looked different now, not physically, but in how people stood within it. Employees who once walked past him like he blended into the walls now straightened, stepping aside with genuine respect. Some gave shy nods. One said, "Thank you, sir." Another, "Your daughter is lucky." A few whispered his name as though it had finally been discovered. Elias kept walking, not for applause, but because Claire deserved peace after a day full of fear. But peace paused right at the entrance. A cluster of firefighters waited there, boots scuffed, jackets stained with soot. The leading officer extended a hand. "Ward, we remember you." His voice carried admiration. "Didn't know where you went, but we're damn glad you never forgot how to fly." Elias shook his hand firmly. "Just doing what needed to be done." "You always did," the firefighter replied. "Good to see you back where you belong." He tapped a patch on his sleeve. "You ever need a support crew, we'd follow you anywhere." The offer sat like a warm ember in Elias's chest. He gave a solemn nod. Once outside, fresh morning air wrapped around them. The scent of coffee and traffic. Normalcy. They walked toward the bus stop where they always stood like everyone else. Quiet, tucked in the background. But this time, people turned to look, eyes soft with gratitude instead of dismissal. Claire tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy? Yeah? Are you scared to fly again?" He kneaded the back of her hand with his fingers. "I'll always be a little scared. But fear doesn't mean stop. It means try carefully." She considered that thoughtfully. "Like when I have trouble breathing but I still walk to school?" He blinked at the simplicity of her wisdom. "Exactly like that," he whispered. Just then, Dominic stepped out of the revolving doors. He looked different, lighter, as though honesty had finally set his shoulders free. He walked toward Elias with an envelope in hand. "I know you're not ready for decisions today," Dominic said, stopping a few feet away, respectful now. "But this is your contract. When you're ready, I'd be honored to have you lead the new division. Not because it saves the company's reputation, because it will save lives." Elias didn't take the envelope at first. Instead, he looked at Claire. She watched him, trusting him without needing explanation. He reached out and accepted the offer, not as surrender to the past, but as acceptance of a new purpose. Dominic smiled with gratitude, then crouched to Claire's level. "You were part of today's rescue, too," he told her gently. "You helped your dad be brave." Claire beamed, shy and proud all at once. Elias rested a hand on her shoulder, his greatest achievement. Dominic stood. "We'll give you both the support you deserve. You won't be alone in this." Elias nodded. "Good," he said, "because no one should have to fight alone." They shook hands, this time as partners. Dominic stepped back. "Get those pancakes, you've earned a whole stack." Elias chuckled as Claire cheered a sleepy cheer. They walked toward the corner cafe, sunlight warming their path. The city, once a cold skyline he only cleaned around, now felt like a place he belonged. A place where people knew his worth, where Claire would grow up knowing her father wasn't invisible. Before entering the cafe, Elias paused to look up. The sky stretched wide above them, not a threat, not a memory, but a promise. He whispered, more to himself than anyone, "I'm ready." Claire squeezed his hand. "Then fly when you want to, Daddy. I'll be right here." He crouched and kissed her forehead. "Always together." As they stepped inside to order pancakes, someone across the street recognized him and lifted a phone to record. Comments would flood in. Stories would spread. But none of that changed what mattered most. A father and daughter breathing freely, a second chance earned through courage, and a sky waiting patiently for their return. Now, tell me the next story title you want to see. Subscribe and don't miss our next story. Title: Trust me, you'll feel it. And tell me in the comments, what injustice should we tackle next?